It's standards they could never live up to, because the things they're adding or wanting to add like have to blow our minds in a specific way. I can be like, oh, it's fine that they changed all these scenes, and it's fine they changed those things because this stuff was so good at the end of it. Again, I just don't believe that's going to happen. How I think I'm going to end up feeling is that, like, man, that game series was great. I really wish they just stuck to being a remake and didn't add all this other bullshit, because man, that didn't pay off.
Hey everybody, before we get started, I just wanted to say, if you enjoy our content and want to stay up to date with our videos, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thanks. So, on to the video.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Random Drop. And this week, we got to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Let's get into it. So, as I mentioned, this is going to be the review for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I am going to talk vagaries about the end of overall how it made me feel. That is probably gonna be the last point in the video, probably mostly in the final thoughts, as I did finish the game yesterday, and I kind of want to get some of my feelings out there and see how other people respond and see what other people think, as I believe I'm probably gonna be aligned with most people. But man, what a ride this game was. How this video is going to be structured is I'm going to talk about the positives, then I'm going to talk about the negatives, then summarize it all in my final thoughts portion of the video. So let's start with the positives. So playing throughout Rebirth, its strongest thing, this whole series of games actually, the strongest thing it has going for it is the way they have rewritten the characters or added more depth to them. All the character interactions and cutscenes and dialogue are masterclass. They are some of the best out there, but it's also playing with what we used to assume of these characters, but filling it all in, right? But now, because in Remake, most of these characters were separated for a lot of the time, and there's a lot going on in that small space where you didn't really like see the characters hang out or talk to each other when there was like downtime. There's always something pressing or serious they needed to get done in Midgar. Now these characters being on a journey throughout the world of Gaia, I believe it's called, they have more time to just talk to each other, joke around. Oh, we're sitting on this boat for a bit. What are we gonna do? Discuss other things, and you just get a better feeling on like who these people are, and it's just so well done. Especially Tifa. I mean, she's still great in the original game, but there are questions you have about her after certain revelations that you're just like, why didn't you ever talk to anyone about this stuff? And this game handles this stuff very early. She's very clear about like, something's a little weird, and that's great. And it's great the character she chooses to confide in and how the crew overall reacts to each other and the events that happen as time goes on. It's a great highlight, and it's again just some of the best. I every time these characters got to interact with each other, or even NPCs and side quests, and I mean actual side quests where dialogue and new characters and side characters, the dialogue in cities, the music in cities, perfection. They did it. This invoked so many incredible feelings in me, and it would be hard to replicate if this was like a new title or new IP. It is solely because this is Final Fantasy VII, and it's like your childhood brain being imagined fully, right? And as I mentioned, the world building, they filled in a lot of blanks that were just not there before. Like, hey, who was around before Shinra was around? What kind of government was there? What is some of the lore that happened with the City of Calm and how it got there? What was the lore with Gongaga? You kind of just arrive these places in the original game and get little snippets on what happened and what the areas were like. But now it's much more filled in, especially with, I believe they're called the ether fonts or the live stream fonts. Once you unlock enough of them, like a pretty 3 or 4 paragraph of, hey, this is the area, the people, and this is what's happening now in the area. Now I get a sense of like why certain things happened and why certain people are certain ways and all that stuff. So again, they have grabbed the world of Gaia in Final Fantasy VII, and like they did with the characters, filled it in more. One thing that carries over from the original game is the in-depth RPG mechanics from the first one, from the remake. Everyone loved that combat, and they took it and revised it. It's still mainly the same combat, but they added more options and the advent of new characters and the way limits breaks work and how character progression works is not overhauled, but tuned up. The materia system is still wholly the same, but now you have, what, 7 characters to fill out, which can get tedious at points, and I'll talk about that later. But the sheer depth you can get into with each character has its own playstyle, which the original Final Fantasy VII, each character was pretty much the same, other than some base stats and their limit breaks. There was no real uniqueness to any character other than like what material you gave them, and again, their limit break. My Red 13, I made him as a tank because he strives off of blocking and countering. So I gave him any material that gave him more ATB for blocking and parrying, making blocking and parrying easier, giving him a ton of health and defense, and giving him the provoke material, right? So he was just a walking tank that did damage, took damage, and gave it back. And that's just one character, and there's just so many layers to Red 13 himself that can be applied to every single other character in this game. Aerith, her ATB bar fills in really slow, but when she gets going, she starts just nuking shit and like rolling ATB bars if she gets her wards on the ground, right? And when she has no ATB or any wards on the ground, she is very, very weak and prone to damage or just getting locked down. So I gave her anything with first strike or starting with a little bit more ATB at the start of the fight. So as soon as the fight starts, she has an ATB, she puts a ward down and she just starts blasting and generating more ATB. I gave her an auto heal material, so whenever she sees a person with low health, she will automatically heal them, and she has the most magic in the game, so when she heals them with her magic level, she just has to use a cure 1 and it'll do like most of their health. And that's why the way I play the game. I could go through every character, but those are some of the highlights where you can min-max the character and customize them how you want to fill in those weaknesses or make class types and role types. There has been a significant improvement in the types of material you get and the options you get from them. Similar kind of to like the Gambit system in 12, but they're very limited because I think they thought that, hey, if there's too many of these, that people are just going to use these and automate the whole battle system, which is probably true. Like if this game gave me the option to play one character and then Gambit the rest, I totally would have done that. But it's like a light Gambit system you're able to do, but it does help with abilities like Barrett, who has like a big blast with this triangle button that recharges over time. You want him to pretty much use that on cooldown. There is a materia where he uses it on cooldown. There's a materia that makes everyone use their triangle ability without you having to switch over, which makes sense for some characters and doesn't make sense for others. Aerith, where her triangle is just a teleport to reward. Like, you don't need her to do that. You'll do that on your own. But yeah, the combat in this game is the main reason I put 100 hours into it. The main story could be completed like 30-ish hours probably, but there's just loads of side content and exploring you can do to get different materials and items and systems. I played it on dynamic difficulty, so the difficulty kind of kept up. A lot of the trash mobs were still super easy to kill, but it kept all the boss fights pretty relevant still, which is some of the highlights of the combat system. And as I mentioned, there's loads of content in this game. I wouldn't have done any of it if the combat wasn't so good, but yeah, the next point is there's just content, and if you enjoy the combat system, you're gonna get a lot of it. There's a ton of different boss fights and areas to explore and side quests to even get more out of your characters, which some of this open world content's gonna be hit and miss for some people. It is very much a Ubisoft way of looking at things, which I'll talk more about in the negatives of like, hey, how some of that world content can really be hit and miss. I overall enjoyed it, but I do have like did I really need to play this game for 100 hours? I probably didn't. And yeah, I'll get more into that in the negatives. But yeah, in terms of content, there's just a massive amount of things to do in this game, right? There's more than just combat. There's Queen's Blood, which is this whole card system with its own story that goes on through the whole game, where you play this really addicting card game and collect those cards. It is the new Triple Triad. It is surpassed Triple Triad. It's like on the levels of Gwent. How much fun, and like you start playing it and you realize, holy shit, there's a lot of depth into this card game. It could just like go places, and then it does, and you start seeing crazier and crazier cards and different enemies and opponents that all play in different ways. I usually avoid side stuff like this because I don't usually find them fun, or maybe they're just like too complicated. But here I went through the whole side quest, and there's a lot of great cutscenes, and that linear story progression for the actual card story. It's a fun time, man, and you get a lot of good extra fun scenes for winning and doing all that stuff. Like, you are rewarded for doing this stuff, not in just cards, but also like character interactions and a little bit more story. And there's also other mini games that were in the original game, and there's like mini games that weren't, and a lot of them are like totally fine or good, or some of them even exceptional. But yeah, there are some that in the negatives, I'll get into that, just like, man, I don't want to ever fucking see this thing again, please. Oh god, it has a weapon in it. Oh fuck me. But one good thing that I realized far too late, like even the mini game weapons and items, I believe, still show up in the weapon shop at some point. I could be wrong, but I think that happened to me after a certain point in the story, I believe. But if you want to get them a lot sooner and earlier, you do the minigame when you're then and there. Usually most of the minigame challenges to get like the good stuff and the weapons aren't that difficult to get. It's just that like sometimes there's a minigame that's like a little bit too overcomplicated. I can think of specifically one, and you're just like, man, I really don't want to do this. I would rather do something else. So let's get into the negatives here. So one of my first complaints really is just something that's been carried over from the original game, or not original game, but remake. It's that the materia system needs some cleaning. I don't believe we need multiple dupes of different materias. I understand why there's certain purple materias that they only give you like 1 or 2 of, or like blue materias that they only give you 1 or 2 of. Because if you had enough for the whole party, you would equip every single party member with these materia. I get it's like a tuning thing, so I hope in the future that the green and yellow materia, and I believe yellow should be fine, you're able to carry those over to your party members and then make enemy skill like its own thing that you can only tie to one character, or maybe it's a certain character that does it. But it kind of sucks because there are certain materials that like enemy skill or assets that like you need every time because you want to assess every enemy and get the Chadley information, right? So I always had that on Cloud because he always has to be in the party, and enemy skill is very, very good and increases the stats. I just kept it on Cloud, and there's a lot of materia like that you're just like, well, I kind of need to have this on here, so let me keep this on Cloud. And I did try to make certain characters would be like, oh, this is my debuffer and this is my magic casters and healers, like Barrett and Aerith were my healers and magic casters, right? But there's sometimes like you get into a fight where you're like missing little gaps, and it feels terrible to be like, oh fuck, let me die so I can switch characters. It's not really that. Switching characters is fine. I like making different characters with different builds. Tifa's my buffer, Yuffie is my debuffer, but the fact that like I can't switch the materials in and out, and there's only like 1 of each, so there's certain parts of the game where you get into it and you're like, oh fuck, like I don't have this character right now, let me switch all these fucking materia around, and there's like 7 characters you're managing. So I think the ability to make like character loadouts, or being like, oh hey, put thunder on this person, it's like, oh fuck, I gotta take thunder off of this person, put it this person, well now he needs something, so let me switch it off. There just needs to be like a bit of cleaning on that stuff. Make it a list for the green materia so you can just slot in whatever you want, and every character just stays that way unless you change it, right? And then make the purple and blue materia something different, or how it connects. It would require a reworking of the system, but just like the sheer amount of time I've spent in menus managing materia and just swapping shit around constantly, because like you get a new weapon, so you gotta like swap all these out, it's just time consuming. Like I bet there's like 4 or 5 hours of just me being in menus swapping out materia in this game, and it's just something that like I don't hate. I would rather, if it's this or lose the materia system completely, then fuck it, I'll deal with it. But as a suggestion for the next game, hey, I hope they could clean it up a bit more and revise it, because man, it's really tedious managing 7 characters all with different weapons and materia loadouts. And again, it just gets very, very tedious, and a bit more customization with the loadout system would be much loved. I could definitely say that. The next thing I want to discuss is like the Ubisofting of content. And when I say Ubisofting, I mean, hey, there's a tower, go touch the tower, and then it blinks everything on the map and you go do things on the map, right? How open world games have been made for the last 5 years, people are getting very tired of it at this point. But Final Fantasy in general has never done this, and 7 Rebirth does it overall pretty well, but I kind of just like didn't need it. I didn't really need these towers. I like the like monster fights and the monster challenges, but they all like come down to like, oh, stagger the enemy, pressure the enemy, kill it. There's very few that require any real specific interactions. Most of that stuff is like in the arena system, where kill this enemy before you kill the other 2, so you have to CC the other 2 enemies while you kill the big one. The game didn't really need all this fluff. There's plenty of content in this game. There really is, and the side quests fill out enough of the game as well. So really, like all this tower gathering and all that stuff, it just kind of like didn't need it. I would rather have them filled out with more bigger boss battles that you could summon, like hunts, or there'd be a hunt board. Then again, the whole tower system in itself, and like the Ubisofting of content, and like the little points on the map that you got to hit and scan. It's a lot of like running around and scanning shit, really. It is. The highlights again are the side quests, which are usually unique content. Of course they're totally optional, but I'm a crazy person, and if it powers up my character in any significant way, I'm gonna do it. because I want to be as strong as possible before the next fight. So I had real bad pacing issues of like, oh, here's the next story beat. All right, let me take like 10 hours to clear out this fucking map, and I'd clear out the map, man. And I understand that's not how you're supposed to do it, but I did it, and I spent 100 hours on it. It's gonna be a while before I go back in the hard mode, just because there's other games to play, and I just, after beating that game, I just need some time away for a little bit. Next point is that there's just too many times where like they force you to play mini games. There's several points in the game where it's like, play all these mini games, and they're fun because like you're interacting with characters while you're kind of doing it, but there's like points where you're no longer in those areas, and then there's just like a new mini game in this other quest line, like the Fort Condor one in Juneau, which is like, okay, fine, I'll do Fort Condor. The only reason it doesn't bother me learning the system is because I played it in intergrade, right? So it's like, okay, I understand this. There's one in Cosmo Canyon where you have to fight like these 4 fiends and play a mini game, and it has the fucking gambit system in it. It has it whole hog in there, and you're supposed to program these little robots to do the combat, dude. I could not be fucking bothered. There's thankfully a button where you can hit where it's like, just program it for me, give me the thing so I can win, and then you beat it and it's like, okay, hey, the hard mode unlocked, and it's like, nah, fuck you, I am never doing that. I'm never doing that shit again. That was the worst quest line. I love the story payoff and all the interactions and all that, but god damn it, every time I stepped into one of those rifts and had to play that stupid ass minigame, whenever the minigame showed up, I rolled my fucking eyes, because it was like, dude, there's a gambit system in this stupid game, and like, dude, I'm like 70 hours into this goddamn game at this point. Please give me a break. This is too much. I hope there's nothing good tied behind it. I never bothered to look at it. I'm not gonna go clear the hard mode. If the platinum requires me to clear the hard mode, fuck it, I'm never getting that platinum, I guess, because I cannot be fucking bothered, man. And the minigame is not even that fun, is the problem, right? Is you play it and it's like another like tower defense thing, and you're just sitting there spawning units. It's like, man, it's just not fun. It's a bad minigame. And yeah, and then there's a few of those in the game as well, spruced out, not as complex, right? There's a lot of bad mini games in the game in itself, but that one is like my particular highlight. And I wonder if any other people agree. When they got to the mini game, it was like Robo something, I don't remember. When they got to that mini game, if they rolled their eyes like I did, because man, I was fucking pissed. I was like, no way, man. The next point is to like carry over from Remake as well, is the stun locking issue. Whenever you play a character, the enemies very much focus on who you are playing. So anytime you switch to another character, they're gonna instantly get aggro unless there's a provoke materia. And even then, the provoke materia doesn't work on bosses. But there are many points in this game where a character will literally just get stun locked to death. There's a particular arena fight with Aerith where you have to fight some bombs that are constantly shooting firebolts at you, and you're just stuck in this stun loop, and it's really, really hard to break and frustrating. If you ever fight Rude in this game, again, it looks like his combo's finished, but he's actually like still doing comboing you, so you can't roll out of it. So your character's just like stunned in a combo animation for like 10 seconds. Eventually you gotta realize that as soon as you get hit in this game, switch character, because they're fucking out. They are out for the next 5-10 seconds because they're just gonna be stun locked to hell. And that's eventually how I ended up playing it, that as soon as the character got hit or knocked back, nah, not playing them, switch character. Because again, the knockback and the stun locking is crazy, and the blocking and dodging just still doesn't feel very good. The best dodger is probably Tifa still, but like the block parry, or like sometimes it feels like I'm out of an animation but my block is not coming up still, and it just doesn't feel good, because there's lots of moments like the animation is actually longer than it looks, or you're locked in between animations, right? It's like, hey, my animation finished, but I can't start my block for a second. So whenever you just need that second, you're trying to get a melee combo in and then like block, it just doesn't feel smooth. It feels very, very clunky. And again, this can be like mitigated by just like putting mana barrier on everyone so they're not taking as much damage, and then switch characters when they get hit. But again, the blocking and dodging just still doesn't feel great. And I guess it's because it's still not an action game, right? They're still trying to keep it as an RPG. So it's like a very light blocking and dodging mechanic. It is very binary, I guess. You're not animation canceling unless you're like have a specific ability that can do that. It still feels bad. It still feels bad for 2 or 3 mobs that are gang up on you and they're just stun locking and stun hitting the character forever. You just gotta learn that if that character is getting hit, just switch characters, because they're not coming out of it unless you pull them out of it. And my biggest complaint is with the AI. I wish the gambit system was in the game, or if there was a button that could be like, hey, I'll focus this target, because there's lots of end game fights where there are damage checks and your AI is fucking off hitting the wrong thing. They will hit the thing you're not hitting when you switch off of them, which is infuriating. I don't know how they program it, But there are certain fights where like you're fighting two bosses at once and one guy's fucking off fighting the other, and then you're over here trying to deal with this damage check that you have to get through. And so you have to make sure, switch, use an ability, while they're locking the ability, switch back, get more ATB. It just, I wish there was like a light gambit system or a personality trait system I could set where like always focus my target, something like that. Because again, they try to do things like, hey, here's a fight where you need to crowd control some targets. Do not hit them once you crowd control them. Maybe there was an easier way to do it. I was using sleep to crowd control them, or in silence were not working. Stop just doesn't last long enough. So I was sleeping the targets, right? But every now and then, Cloud's little fucking cleave will hit the hit a different target, or the sleep comes in at a different timing because they're off hitting the side targets instead of the main target we need to be hitting, and they're not slept. They go over and attack that little target because the whole purpose of the mission is kill this big fucker before you kill the two side little guys. It was not happening. Eventually I got through it and RNG'd my way of like, oh, I CC them on the other side of the room and kept them locked down. But it's an infuriating thing. And also, like, you notice it with the Tonberries, or there's like one mission where there's like 50 Tonberries, or like 10 or 15 of them really, but the characters suck shit at dodging. So like Tonberries stun lock you and run up and stab. So if I'm not controlling that character, they're probably gonna die. And yeah, it's just a shit show. Again, I wish the AI was a bit better, especially with like targeting and focus targeting. It just does not feel super great. They'll be defensive when they need to be, but when they are being offensive, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Or they're sometimes like standing around not doing anything. Like I literally watch Cloud just and not doing anything while there's nothing going on. He's like, dude, attack something, man. But yeah, that's my biggest complaint with the combat in itself, is like, hey, I wish the AI was a bit better, or I could like set a tactic for each one. So, you know, please focus my target. I need you to focus my target. That's probably why the highlight of the game is those single large boss fights, because we're only hitting one target. And my last negative is the ending of the game, man. There is, spoilers, like interdimensional multiple timeline stuff. We've known this since remake. So let's get into it. Big spoiler, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to talk about the ending of the game and how it made me feel. So 99% of this game is the original game. Very much a known journey, because remake ends with that quote, the unknown journey will continue. This journey is 99% of the same. It's literally the last 1%, which stays the same, but not, and a little weird, and like multiple timelines, but it's like actually just still the same. But now there's like, this character has other context to other events going on in the background, but not all the other characters do, and he won't fucking talk to them. It's really weird. And especially with Aerith and all that stuff, and it's like, why didn't she like just tell someone about what the fuck her plan was and what's even going on? And then we're just supposed to continue to the third game, like, okay, but like what's different? Because like nothing really is, and you don't know what like the villain's main goal is in any way. You don't know what the main hero Aerith's goal is in any way. It's just like some really weird vague bullshit, and then you're not supposed to trust Cloud at this point, right? He's an unreliable narrator. But it's like the original game still, right? Like it just feels like either change it or don't. And we're getting this weird middle road where they are trying to have both, right? There's a large event that has been known for years, Final Fantasy VII and Aerith, and many people wondered like, hey, are they gonna change it? And spoilers, blah blah blah, right? Is like, they kind of didn't. Like it's just like this really weird non-committal thing. I would have appreciate it if they did change it, man. If by like the end of the day, like we changed fate, or if it's or the other more tragic thing is that they try to avoid it and it's a fixed point and it happens anyways, but both happen, which makes no fucking sense. And I've watched videos and gone through it multiple times at this point. It's like, okay, I understand what's like they're trying to do, but how it's shown is so poorly. And really, like, my issue with it at the end of the day is I just don't know where they're going with it. Like, I don't trust them to actually do this well, because they're just setting up stuff that like they're trying to have their remake and their sequel at the same time. And I feel like the remake part is going to be great, and we're still going to have those events and moments in the last part, but there's like other story they kind of like ham-fisted into the game. Like I don't know if that's going to pay off, and I have even more doubts now, because if it doesn't pay off, my issue with it hurts Sephiroth in that story. It hurts Aerith in that original story. It makes me literally want to cut off the ends of these past games and make an edited version of episode 1 type shit, right? It's just I really want to know more people's opinions and what they think, and please leave comments in the below. Again, I understand what they're doing. It's just I have like very little faith if they're gonna be able to pull it off, because like, again, I feel like it's what they're currently doing is non-committal in either way, and knowing their past records, man, it's just not gonna pay off. And I'm here for the ride, right? I'm here for this stupid ride, but it's standards they could never live up to, because the things they're adding or wanting to add like have to blow our minds in a specific way. I can be like, oh, it's fine that they changed all these scenes, and it's fine they changed those things because this stuff was so good at the end of it. Again, I just don't believe that's gonna happen. How I think I'm gonna end up feeling is that, like, man, that game series was great. I really wish they just stuck to being a remake and didn't add all this other bullshit, because man, that didn't pay off. And that is my fear where we're gonna end up, because they're never gonna remake this series again. And I'll still have my memories of the first and my memories of this series, and I can combine them too, and like, hey, that's the world of Final Fantasy VII. Man, what a great ride. But there could be this little stain at the end of like, oh man, but like, remember that like really fucked up part that like just didn't need to exist? But I hope I'm wrong. I hope that the third game comes out and blows my fucking mind, and it will probably gameplay wise, character interaction wise, and original story wise. It's very hard to believe that the weird stuff they're doing with the multi-timelines and all that, and the multiple Aeriths and multiple Sephiroths pays off in any significant way, in such a way that it's so good that I'm glad they did it, right? Because the whole exciting thing, the remake ending, while I was kind of like fine with it, is like, oh man, they might like really fuck with some shit in the next game. Rebirth is the original game, 99% the original game. The last 1% is where they do some weird shit, and I guess it's gonna pay off in the third. So maybe the third one's gonna be wildly different, and it's gonna go off in this crazy tangent, and it'll be great, and like an actual different adventure, an actual new game. But Rebirth in itself is just the original game. It is that it all just plays out how it originally did. So yeah, you could play this and still get the original 7 story. It just makes me question, hey, what is that third one really gonna be like? I have so many questions, which is a good thing, right? It's gonna get people to speculate and discuss things and all that, but like when you set up in that way of like a lot of like clues and like visuals and dialogue and all that stuff, it has to pay off really well, right? Again, I really don't think they're gonna be able to pull off in the third one, but I'm hoping I'm fucking wrong, man. I very much hope I am wrong. Yeah, I dumped 100 hours in this game. I had a great time, and it was an incredible experience. The ending is just like, man, fuck, man. Yeah, it's just such a weird feeling. No other game can ever be like this and evoke this feeling. I hope you had a master plan this whole time, and we're all a bunch of idiots. And I will happily admit I'm wrong if by the third game they fucking pull it off. Dude, awesome. I hope. I just don't believe it right now. Anyways, I've ranted long enough about that. Jesus Christ. So my final thoughts. This game is probably some of the best RPG combat that's ever existed. In terms of a Final Fantasy game, the interactions between characters and the environments and zones, top of the line. Like, this is it, man. Managing a party and customizing them, everything, all of them being unique, different personalities, and hanging out with them and doing things more than just combat, but actually learning more about these characters, right? That's why like the Persona series is so good, because like you like just hanging out with the crew and stuff like that. It's not all about saving the world sometimes. Sometimes there needs to be some down moments and just like smell the roses, and this game has it. It nails it so hard and lets you just like really dive into this world and these characters, and it's some of the best. Even though I have my qualms with the ending, I think this remake is absolutely incredible. How I feel about like the remake story by the end of the series is hard to tell at this point, and I'm hoping I'm wrong with my qualms. But yeah, man, as everyone's been saying off the rooftops, like this game is very, very, very good gameplay wise, character interaction wise. Its faithfulness to the original story, other than like the last 1%. And again, it is very much the last 1% where things just go off the fucking rails, man. And that's how I feel about it. Final Fantasy Rebirth is a very, very good game. Check it out. But hey, let me know. Leave a comment below, and I'll see you on the next Random Drop review. Peace.